that was a big mistake. The idea that, like, putting China in the UN or the WTO or whatever other international governing bodies there are would make them follow the international order.
When they can just create their own international.
Or actually, what they did was undermine those organizations from within and use those mechanisms to do things that were, favorable to them.
Yeah.
Right, like corrupting certain like UN organizations, corrupting the World Trade Organization,
being on the UN Human Rights Council, changing the definition in the UN of Hong Kong so it wasn't considered a colony, like, so it wouldn't be granted the rights given to other former colonies. Like, it's just, yeah.
Well, and I think you mentioned China viewing the U.S. as a pushover. I think it's really telling that right before Blinken arrived in China, the CCP released this footage of one of their submarines test firing nuclear-capable ballistic missiles. Right after he left, they did some more test runs of military drills near Taiwan for
I mean,
the
I don't
millionth
think,
time.
I guess in Blinken's defense, I don't think that it was like a super amicable meeting and that like he went and like caved on a bunch of stuff in person,
But if Antony Blinken really had cojones, he would have told the pilot to turn that jet around in midair and not land in China. Like, that's what I would have done. Because that says, like, if you agree to then land and have that meeting right after the CCP has just given you the finger by doing these like missile tests, like you're basically letting them do that piece of salami slicing and saying that's okay. We understand the CCP is salami slicing.
I don't think this is salami slicing. Technically. It's showing disrespect to the U.S. And you're right. He should have been like, well, you could have said, well, fly to Taiwan instead.
Yeah, they would never do that.
I know.
Yeah, but he could have turned the plane around and flew back, or refueled in Tokyo or something. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have to land in China.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that would be sending a message. That's the thing. Like the U.S. does have, even still, like it comes from a position of power. It just needs to be willing to use that.
Well, I think this is when we had
a podcast guest on to talk about this.
David
Stillwell. Okay, so Stillwell was the former Assistant Secretary of State for Asia Pacific.
Yes. Well, so we had him on, I think the first time he was talking a lot about reciprocity.
Right.
And the idea within the, Trump-Pompeo State Department that the U.S. needed to just treat China with reciprocity. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do this to us, like we will just like do that same thing and then we'll see, it's not like disrespect to kind of like just have reciprocity on both sides. But I think the way that the Blinken State Department has treated China is like you almost have to like if there's like a lot of like don't offend them. Mm-hmm.
Which was very much the strategy, definitely under the Obama administration, and I'm sure before.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the latter couple years of the Obama administration, there was a little bit of a change in that there was like obviously a build up of frustration, and then they eventually kind of started to wise up, but not enough to like affect any like real meaningful change before Trump came in. But like the idea that first you have to worry about not angering China, right? In order to get them to the table to talk about things. And so that immediately cedes a lot of power to the CCP to get offended at a bunch of things and like to make it so that, the State Department feels like they have to be on tenterhooks or like just like tiptoe around to not, make things worse.
Yeah, it seems like their goal is the diplomacy, the talking. This is what you were saying earlier, Matt.
Right.
And so it seems like they'll give China whatever they want just so they can talk.
Right. There's very it should be obvious elementary school psychology here, right? Which is the CCP is the schoolyard bully. And Antony Blinken is acting like that kid that's constantly scared of that bully and so gives the bully his lunch money every single day because he's scared of the consequences of not doing it. Whereas, like, the actual way to resolve it is to stand up to that bully. And if it means building a coalition of other kids in your class who are all being picked on and standing up together, you'll be more powerful. But like, those things aren't happening. It's just everyone's giving them their lunch money.
I think the problem is the U.S. is like picking the wrong kid. They're picking like the EU when they should be picking.
Lithuania.
Well, I think that's part of it. But like, they should be picking, the Philippines, Vietnam, India,
As like the countries that
Japan,
are
South Korea.
ready
Yeah.
to fight.
I mean, I
Yeah.
do think that they are doing that more than they were before.
Yes.
But there's still, I think when Biden came in and he was kind of like, we're going to be, building consensus with our allies, not like Trump, who just like went in and offended people and did whatever. But that was still like looking at it in a very kind of Eurocentric way, where like it was like, oh, we need to rebuild our relationship with Europe, who would
Germany and France in particular.
and then, but the problem is that Europe doesn't really want to stand up to the CCP. I mean, they kind of are getting a little annoyed now with like flooding the CCP, flooding them with like cheap electric cars and some of this stuff. But for a long time they were just like, and also I think there's this thing where they didn't want to be the U.S. They didn't want to be like, they didn't want to follow the U.S. Like they wanted to be independent.
Right.
So they were like, okay, their approach to the China was that they will just be neutral. Like they're not going to get like
kind of like how they treated Russia.
Yeah, and it didn't work out real well for them, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like how much like Trump was pushing NATO countries to like pay more for defense, and they got really upset, and that was one of the reasons people said that like, oh, Trump is angering our allies. He's not working. It's very bad. And then Ukraine war. And suddenly, maybe defense.
Or what was that? Wasn't there some clip of him saying something about like Europe getting gas from Russia and how that was like a bad idea?
It's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia.
And it was, at the time, people mocked him for like offending Europeans for saying that or something like that. And then, of course, Russia invades Ukraine, and then like the gas pipelines become a huge deal.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oops.
But I mean, sometimes a guy who's kind of a can be saying things that you do need to hear, even if you don't like the way he's saying them.
This is the premise of I can't think of the name of the movie with the puppet movie, Team America.
Oh, World Police. Okay.
World Police. Yeah, I can't say it on this kids friendly podcast, but there's a whole thing about I just said all the words. Bleep all of those out, Anderson, please. Yeah, I guess it's not the analysis of those words, it's those words themselves.
I mean, to be fair, you had already originally said.
Yeah.
I did.
And then I also said, so we'd already been 2 out of 3.
Huh. So the point is, sometimes you do need to. This has been culturally over the past couple of decades kind of a verboten thing in the U.S. that like the U.S. has power and can use that power to achieve its goals and achieve American values. Because there's sort of this idea of like, oh no, America, it's colonialist and it's white and it's bad. It should just, give up power and let, China become the new. We'll have the UN fix everything. And that doesn't work. Because there's, a Marxist-Leninist authoritarian regime that is trying to become the sole superpower in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that like, oh, well, like the U.S. should stop being the world police, or, every country should be able to do what they want for themselves. sounds nice, except that the majority of the world is authoritarian.
Yes.
And there are specifically authoritarian countries like China, like Russia, like Iran, like North Korea, who aren't just happy oppressing their own people, right?
Mhm.
They also want to oppress other people